Hi there, and thank you for clicking on my video. Going to talk a bit about damage reduction today and how you can increase your effective HP. About 25 minutes into a steel path Kuva survival. Um, just dealing with, obviously, there's a bunch of enemies. We got about 30 to 40 enemies around us. And you can see that our health tank is actually sustaining. Just going to give a talk on like damage reduction. It's generally joked about in the community that like health tanking is ineffective. And while I would agree that it does have a cap, you can actually get reasonably tanky, even as far as Steel Path. Obviously, it's going to be a tighter build, but even with no life support and a decent number of enemies firing at me, I'm able to maintain my health just fine. Eventually, the game will just kick me out of the mission if I don't extract fast enough. Um, but there is a lot of talk about like, oh, effective HP, and generally effective HP, especially now that Archon shards. So we'll roll this into a how to health tank, how to not die, um, forms of tanking, more particularly. I won't be addressing shield gating, but more how you can increase, especially with the Archon shards coming out, how you can maybe help yourself out a bit and making the game a little more enjoyable. But yeah, as you can see, this build is fairly effective at maintaining a tank. And it looks like we're about to get a an acolyte torment. Um, I'm pretty sure the slash proc from this guy can kill me. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, health tank, even though it is joked about, can be fairly effective, especially a regular. Like if you're just trying to get through the star chart, health tanking is incredibly adequate. And even in steel path, like this setup that I'm using right now, can pretty easily face tank 1300s, 1400s, and this is actually one of um, the build on this is actually one of the frames where I sort of have a goal to be able to, and there it kicked us out finally. Um, to be able to like face tank level cap. It's not that far off if I can get to 1500, right? I mean, obviously it's still a multiple, but probably a pretty sassy invigoration will get us there. So let's talk builds. And there's going to be a tiny bit of math, not a bunch. Into the simulacrum we go. All right, so the first major thing, and we'll make a list. Oops, not that. Okay, so the first major thing in terms of EHP is we have shields, we have health, we have armor. Bread and butter. Every frame has these, and the only option to not have it is shields. There's a couple of frames that don't have shields. Nidus and Inaros, basically. Um, like even Grendel has a tiny shield on him, right? But this is where the biggest calculation for like effective hit points. But there is some nuance to this, right? Um, like obviously there's talk about like the new shards where it's like what's the most effective way to tank using them if you're going to be using the blue shards, especially since you're going to have so many of them left over. And it has a lot to do with the math. Armor, hold on. Warframe, armor. All right, so the short and simple of EHP is for health and armor. The interaction is generally, and it's because of this equation. It's not a lot of big brain thinking, but for just armor, you're going to hear a lot of people mention, oh, you need to get to 300 armor. The reason being is because of the damage reduction equation. If this was 500, then you would try to race to 500, right? If it was 600, you would try to get to 600. But the equation is based around 300. And that's because it looks like the 1 over x equation, if you remember that from like algebra, where it's like a slope. And at 300 is exactly 50% damage reduction. So if it was higher, you would try to get the higher. But Warframe is based around 300. So if you don't have on your frame, like this frame has a decent chunk of armor, not an insane. But if you don't have 300 armor, you need to try to get there if you're trying to health tank. The next major source is health. So we're getting our armor from fiber. This is a triple Umbra setup. It's incredibly tanky, hard to kill. More importantly, hard to one-shot, which is the important one. We're running the triple Umbra set, so we're getting tons of health. 1337 health, so it's elite health, right? With Umbral Fiber and Umbral Intensify, just to help out the scaling on the shield. And because we have so much strength and armor as we do, just by pressing my 3 on Nezha gives me 5,000 shield before absorption window, right? The iframes. So that's our most effective way to amplify our health pool because we're trying to heal tank and health tank. We don't care about shields. Because one of the effective ways of regaining like energy is through the Hunter Adrenaline mod. But this requires you to take health damage constantly, which Nezha and, say, Nidus are very good at doing because they have so much damage reduction innately on the frame. So for most frames, they would be running around with just their armor. And say another frame, not Nezha, or say this Nezha, but I'm not using the 3. If I was just using armor, I would have 70% damage reduction. But because of the innate ability of Nezha, Warding Halo, which you should never helmet over, this provides 90% damage reduction to health. So where I started out with 70.9, I slide the decimal to the left and add a 9 to the front. So just by having Warding Halo up and my armor, I have 97.09 damage reduction. So for Nezha can get away with this pretty easily. Most frames are not. But we also have the adaptation mod, which when it's fully stacked, and for new people, I would highly recommend not ranking this up at all. Because the thing that changes, and I think I have an unranked one. I should have an unranked. Okay, so an unranked one every time you receive a damage type and you absorb a damage type, you gain a resistance stack against it. So if you notice, when damaged, so when I receive it, so say I walk through a bombard AoE, the heat AoE, right? Every time that AoE hits me for heat damage, I will gain 5% with an unranked mod, but it stacks up to 90%. If you notice on the max rank mod, when damaged, 10% resistance to that damage type for 20 seconds stacks up to 90%. The maximum stack is the same. So a way, if you're like free to play, where you can be a little bit more forma conscious, it's a rank 2 mod, unranked. So if you're trying to be cheap, thrifty, effective with your forma or your plat, however you want to think about it, you can leave this on, and eventually you will receive the same amount of stacks. And it will be the same damage reduction. But this mod stacks with the damage reduction from warding Halo. So with this on, or this stacked up, plus warding Halo, Nezha would be able to get 99.7% damage reduction from base armor and from the damage reduction from warding Halo and adaptation. Because that's 99% together, right? So we're multiplying our health, or our effective HP. We went from like a couple thousand to now we're at like tens of thousands. Once you get later in the game, a way of keeping yourself alive for a very long time, and you saw me standing there and with all the enemies shooting at me. This is obviously a more late game build. But you have Arcane Guardian for an additional 900 armor. And for some quick math, okay. So we have 731 plus 900 from Guardian, which brings us to 1631. Okay. With this triggered. But there's also this other mod, which Necros players might know. But this was a meta mod on Necros for a long time. And I'm pretty sure it might not be the meta mod, because Terrify is so potent right now. But it's definitely one of those mods where you basically need a reason to take it off. Because every time you pick up a health orb, you gain 450 armor. Stacks up to 3 times. So that's 450 times 3. So just this one mod at 3 stacks boosts your armor by 1350. So you're stacking armor. Now, I know people are going to say, oh, it's not effective. It's not the best way to stack EHP. Because Arcane Grace heals me for a percentage of my max health when I have a chance to trigger a health regen effect for 6% of my max health. But it's a 9% chance to trigger when I receive damage. Okay. So 6%, we'll do the calculation. 1337 times 0.06. That's 80 HP a second. And to be honest, this isn't that good. In terms of the health regen also that's on it. So, hold on, we'll bring this back up. Okay, so we have shields, which we don't care about because we're trying to health tank. So we have health, armor, percent damage reduction. Nezha and Nidus get 2 easily. Mesa also has a pretty nasty percent damage reduction. But traditionally Mesa doesn't health tank. But Mesa's goes to 95%, right? So definitely better. We also have the plus conditional. We'll just say defense for now. Guardian. And what was that other one? And health conversion. There's also another one if you are a helmet charger, Chad. Not this one. Mecha Pulse. As much armor as health conversion can give me, and Arcane Guardian, and my base armor, when you add it all together, right? So it's 1350 for health conversion, plus 900 for Guardian, plus 731 is just shy of 3k armor if you add these together. Well, the issue is Mecha Pulse is completely contingent on the number of enemies nearby based on the aura effect radius, and can give you more armor than all of these together. Because it's, what, plus 60 armor. Now, obviously, there's a limit because there's only so many enemies that are going to spawn. But okay, so killing a marked enemy grants 60% armor for 20 seconds. It's additive, so it adds with base armor, Arcane Guardian, and health conversion. It's just an added-on bonus. But when you kill an enemy, the game counts how many enemies are within 30 meters. So all you would need is like what? 3,000 divided by 60. Okay, so at 50 enemies, which is a lot, by the way, but at 50 enemies, Mecha Pulse would give me the same amount of armor that I have all over my frame. Now, what's more likely is you can hit, obviously you can hit in the 1,000 armor pretty easily. Because that's like, what, 600 is 10 enemies, 20 enemies is 1,200. Right? So 20 enemies in 30 meter radius is pretty easy to do. So you're looking at, on the low end, unless enemies you've just been mowing them down, another health conversion, which gives you more armor. Now, I brought it up before, but like I know the meta is to go for EHP, and I'm making a case for not that. Reason being is that there is another category. Actually, there's technically a couple. In terms of EHP, you also have minus accuracy. You also have minus damage. Minus accuracy is more about blast damage. And was it? There's the aura mod for Corpus. Corpus, right? Yeah. Corpus enemies have reduced accuracy, minus 15% hit chance, right? I think there's another one. Oh, it's evasion. Sorry. And that's going to be another one I'm going to be adding. So you have minus accuracy of the enemy. So they innately have a harder time hitting you. This is where blast damage is going to come into. It's not going to be something ultra reliable. But if the enemy can only hit you 85% of the time, well, you effectively have like a little bit more health, right? It still counts in terms of effective HP, and it could make the difference if you're up against like the corrupted MOAs, where they have like the lasers, or say like an enemy like that has like a Kuva comb, right? Like on the Kuva survival, right? When those guys get wound up, their fire rate, they can dish out tons of damage. So technically, this also increases your effective HP, your survivability when health tanking, which we'll define it as that. You also have minus damage. The status effect for this would be puncture. Again, not a super common, a super common way of debuffing the enemy, but it certainly works. It's a 90% damage reduction on the enemy. So you have puncture, but then you also have Equinox. Equinox has a damage debuff where it's an aura. So that would count toward the effective HP of your party. Equinox. Let's just say abilities. Put Equinox in parentheses. Because it's kind of a unique ability. An AoE debuff. You also have another way to increase your survivability when health tanking. It's a little old school, but you also have movement. Now, the running theory, and this is going to be about the most bro science portion of this, but it is reasonably considered. I've heard a couple of people say that it's hard-coded, where the faster you move, the harder enemies have a time of hitting you. I mean, that would make sense logically. If you're bombing through a mission and you're moving super fast, obviously it's harder to hit a moving target. Like, if you move fast enough, eventually a bombard's just never going to be able to hit you unless you're in a hallway. Because those are slow-moving rockets, right? But say, like, an enemy with a laser, right? Like, they should be able to hit you. So maybe this has been adjusted. But any enemy that has, like, a projectile, if you're moving faster than the projectile can get to you, it's not going to hit you. Like, if you can get out of the way. Especially if you're rotating like clockwise, counterclockwise, like you're moving perpendicular to the line of fire. This will increase your survivability when health tanking. Then you also have... What's the actual stat? It's evasions coming to mind. Yeah, so this would be something like you would use on like Zaku. Like an evasion stack. And then you also have the, oh, which one is it? It's one of the Predicites. Or, no, it's a Volpophile. It's a Volpophile. Ooh, not that one. I think it's this one. Yeah. So the Sly Volpophile would give you a ton of evasion. And allow you to dodge better. Or to allow you to have a higher EHP, right? So this would increase it. Evasion percent. Okay. So we have all of this stuff that adds up, right? And then you have, on top of this, you would have statuses... like say radiation. So you would have like statuses, say radiation, where it causes enemies to fire at each other and not focus on you. You would also have cold, which would slow down their rate of fire, thereby decreasing the amount of damage you take. You would also have impact, which would have like a flinch, right? And that how long the flinch lasts can be extended with cold. This is pretty important. The cold proc. It is pretty important for like killing Demolus, where you need something to stay in one spot, or at least be easier to get headshots on. the stun effect, if you will, is also one of the ways that you can gain affinity by using Banshee Silence. That little controlled confusion, right? If there's a slow aura, that's why you use Gloom. You can extend that duration. Then you would also have Heat for Panic. Impact, Stun, Cold, Slower, Fire. So you would have the Flinch. I don't like Stun. Let's say Flinch. I forget what the actual status is. Let's say Flinch. Because they're technically not stunned, right? They just sort of like flinch. Then you have the Panic effect from Heat. If they're panicking, that means they're not hitting you. And if the enemy can't hit you, you're effectively immortal. So you would have statuses like these. You would also have the ever popular Gloom. Would slow the enemy down, so it would act like a super cold proc, right? Decreases how fast the enemies can react to you, which means if you can keep a Gloom AoE up, like if you can easily keep a Gloom AoE up, you can easily maintain like a health tank if you have enough range on it. Like if the enemies have to walk into like a tunnel or like you're doing a camp build, but by the time they get into the area that you're in, like if they're funneling in, they instantly walk into a Gloom AoE, you're that better off, right? Obviously, you're going to have to balance kill rate and a survival, right? You would also have... Oh, hold on. Almost forgot one of the better ones. Electric. Shock is also a way that you can CC the enemies and increase your survivability when health tanking. So we would have that. Gloom. Any sort of like, and I'm not going to list these all out, but any sort of like AoE grouping abilities. So say like we're talking health tank, right? You could do like not necessarily a group, but like a stun, like crowd control. Harder the better. So like Nidus is 2, nezha is 4, even Gyre's 2 would count because it has the like the yoink. It doesn't last very long, but it grabs the enemies, and when they're attached and there's like the Tesla coil effect, they're not shooting you, and it's how she maintains her survivability, right? Obviously, Eximus units exist in the game, so it's not ultra effective, but it would allow you to CC all the trash mobs, so you can deal with an Eximus unit more effectively. So hard CC, let's just say hard CC. Zephyr Tornadoes would be hard CC. Like a little bit softer CC would be stuff like Excalibur's Blind, where it blinds them, but it doesn't displace them. Obviously doesn't work on Eximus units. But like things like this, if the enemy's blind and in sort of like where it has like the star effect, they're not shooting you, so your survivability if your health tanking goes up. So like just to give you guys some ideas, this is just what I came up with, right? Using these is how you would increase your survivability. So you could health tank more effectively. Like this was the, like say Blast specifically, was honestly, even though the Brahma and the Tonkor do hella damage, Blast procs are hella underrated for CC, because just like one proc is like minus, what, 50%? Blast status. Let me Google it. Blast status. For soft CC, Blast is not bad, bro. Okay. A single Blast proc is 30% accuracy, or minus 30% accuracy. So if enemies that are shooting at you have a blast proc on them, oh come on, right? It would be 1 divided by 0.07. So if all of the enemies around you have a blast proc on them, you're 43% tankier, right? So, bro math, obviously there's probably a finer calculation to that. But that's with 1 blast proc. Because they're hitting you only 70% of the time. Large number average. Obviously, a bombard really can't miss if you're in a tunnel, right? And the blast proc damage does nothing for Corpus, Grenier, Machinery. You're not fighting that. Fossilized is about the most utility. So it's a fairly neutral element. I mean, there's not really, like, obviously there's minus 25% against ferrite, so that's a big deal. So it would be neutral against the Grenier, or against Infested. A slight negative against trash mobs. And elite units wouldn't care. But they wouldn't care, but they wouldn't get you wouldn't get bonus damage against them, right? So it's not a horrible extra element, and I think I've talked about Blast before. Like as a secondary passive element that just exists on your weapon, it is really good because it increases your effective health. It increases how much you can tank per second because the enemy is now missing, like significantly more. So it's super nice to have as like a passive. So this is just like for your consideration. I've looked for like EHP calculators, and they're all kind of meh. But there's hypothermia.cc. So we'll leave shields at 0, and we'll talk about how much effective HP this nezha has. So health is 1337. Armor is 731. Whoa. Okay, so at base, with just base health and base armor, we have basically 4,600 effective HP. With just the 3, it brings us up to 46k. With adaptation stacked, we're at 460k. Now let's add in our conditionals. Okay. So we have Arcane Guardian. Hold on, math time. I did this before. I closed it. Yeah, okay. So 731 plus 1350 plus 900. Okay, so let's change the armor value to 2981. Okay. 2981. And I will get this, the max stacks, from health conversion fairly regularly because I'm running the Hunter set, or the Synth set, on the Panzer. So here's the final, and what sort of tips the hand of which you need to stack more. I talk about it a lot. I know other people talk about it a lot. But as long as you have a little bit of health, like at least a health mod, there is another status that is multiplicative in terms of effective HP. It's additive to health, but it's multiplicative to everything else. And it's health recovery. Regenerating health. gets super busted the more armor you have and the more damage reduction. So, with everything stacked, I have 91% damage reduction just from armor. And then I have 99% ability damage reduction from the 3, and I've added the 90% in from adaptation. Okay. And then on top of all of that, oh, hold on, not this. Okay. It didn't affect it. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it didn't affect it. On top of all of this, I also gained the benefit with health reduction of the damage reduction, or health recovery gains the benefit of the damage reduction. So because of where health recovery is, it's at the smallest source. So if you have a ton of armor and damage reduction, and then you're regenning 300 health a second. So just from Grace was like 80 health, right? So just Grace, I think it was like 80.1 health. Okay. So I have, with my current build, I have an effective health of 1.46 million. Okay. So I would need to figure out how much effective health I'm recreating with just Grace. So the easy way to do that is you figure out what the ratio is. So with percent damage reduction, I would then do 99.91, which is my percent damage reduction and the effective damage reduction from armor. Okay. And then I would do minus 100. And then 100 divided by that, right? Give or take. And then I would multiply this by 80. So Arcane Grace is creating 88,888 effective hit points every second that it's triggering, provided I have everything stacked. But then I'm gaining regen from the health orbs from the Panzer also. So that can gain even more because it depends on the number of health orbs. And because of Reaping Chakram, I will then be able to pick up a ton of health and energy orbs. So every second, give or take, I'm making 200,000 to 250,000 effective HP worth of health, which is an incredible face tank, but still isn't enough to get the level cap. But in order to increase the survivability, I would have to start pairing up all of these other damage reduction sources, because I'm, to be honest, besides the ones up here, I'm not including puncture. I'm not including accuracy in my build. The nezha isn't inherently fast. To be honest, I want it to be face tank, so I'm going to not max this at all. But say like a new core, like a new core with like heat and like a corrosive build would be fantastic for this. Because it's a heat panic status and radiation procs. And it would allow me that much more. And I could also potentially keep Gloom up for forever, which would then provide more health recovery. But it still wouldn't protect me against like a level cap bombard hitting me in the face. And to also prove the opposite, like this is all of these things included is also part of the reason why people just go Shieldgate. Because Shieldgate can replace all of this crap. But if you wanted to health tank, you're looking for a Warframe with high health to begin with, high armor to begin with. And it gets significantly easier with Guardian You might not have Grace, because this is one of the more expensive arcanes. If there ever comes up with a new event where you can farm these, this is one of the arcanes, Arcane Grace, that you need to farm. You need this arcane. It is a core part of many builds. So this would be like how the hand gets tipped a little bit. Going back to effective HP. Effective HP isn't the entire name of the game. It is the name of the game on getting one shot when you don't have shield gating, though. Because it's not going to be until way later in the game. Let's see. Bombard. Kuva. Bombard. The JavaScript isn't loading. I can't figure out what the level would be to get the one shot. But a 1.4 million EHP frame is fairly tanky for a health tank. Like, obviously, Nidus can get higher. Chroma can be ridiculous. Like, Chroma, as of right now, can absolutely face tank level cap on its own. Right? Like, no, Chroma can face tank level cap. I want my nezha to be able to do it. So this is maybe sort of a declaration that I'm going to make this crap work one time. Without relying on hard CC from nezha's 4, right? But I might be like a strength, 1,000 armor invigoration away from trying a level cap with this build. Because I'm pretty sure that would do it. It wouldn't help me with the damage reduction, but I could probably take some strength off this somewhere and throw more armor on, right? Certainly rolling guard or something. But then you also have what's the other thing? I almost forgot. It's going to be a shorter video, only 42 minutes. Then you also have like cheese mechanics, where it's not. It is still shield gating, but it is not a panicky shield gating. Let's see what Arcana Aegis is going for right now. Because if this is like 150p, I'm just going to tell you to go get the damn thing. I doubt it is. Okay, it's not too bad. Just go buy the damn Arcane. 250 PC. What? Okay, there we go. 650. $350, $400. Obviously, it's higher on console, right? So on PC, Arcana Aegis is definitely buyable. And reason being is that, say you don't have Grace. Grace is expensive. It's not Energize expensive, but it's expensive. But if you notice, I'm not running Energize on this build. Because I'm so tanky, I can actually effectively use Hunter Adrenaline to keep my energy maxed. I'm not even running Flow. And I have no intention of putting an Archon Shard on this for energy. It's going to be health regen and armor and health. I'll just run like a full tank build or something. But if you run Aegis, like Grace, this one is on shield damaged. 30% chance for 30% shield recharge for 12 seconds. Because I'm running Brief Respite, and the shield is so low, and the fact that I am not running any efficiency mods, just my 2, which is where I get my energy from anyway, from Reaping Chakram. This works for nezha, obviously. I can recreate shield and stay in shield gate with just my 2, because I need to get to 38. This will give me the 38. So to be more comfortable, I would need like another auger mod, right? Because it would be like 37.5. It technically rounds, but you need overs, so I would need one more auger mod somewhere else on the build. But important enough is that it would give me shields, and every time the shield gets hit, there's a chance for this to trigger. It's super low, but when it triggers, it's beautiful. This is not re-triggerable, so it won't stack on top of itself. But when it triggers, you are essentially an infinite shield gate for 12 seconds. Obviously, like a really nasty heat proc can overload it, I've noticed. A toxin proc certainly can get by it, because you need overs to prevent the status effect. To prevent the status effect direct damage. But aegis can provide you with free stacks or free shield gate for 12 seconds from like physical damage, basically. It's super effective. So this would be another option to further increase the tank of this build. And to be honest, it's probably going to be something that I have to do if I want to improve it. And I might even get rid of Guardian. And then you have like focus school stuff, which I'm going to skip. But there's focus node stuff that like slows enemies and stuff like that, which would technically count as like damage reduction. And most of it stacks multiplicatively with cold. So you can get enemies really, really slow if you need to, right? But in terms of like effective HP, these are the main mechanics of health tanking and being safer about it. Because I see a lot of people trying to shield gate and having trouble with it. Everybody in the clan and the alliance is doing way better with shield gating. I'm really surprised. Especially with using stuff like rolling guard. It's really, I'm seeing really good things. But if you wanted to see like a straight up Facetank build, the only one that I have right now that would be more effective, like obviously this is a more expensive build. It's an 8 Forma Nezha that's triple Umbra. Like there's a ton of Forma on this build. Would be like a Nidus. Nidus could Facetank. At least is survivable, obviously, because if you go into the passive from your 4, you can keep the stacks up faster than you lose them, right? So it's definitely a thought. But in terms of like regular mission running, I've used this nezha for a ton. It's not my daily driver nezha. But if I'm against something where I'm really having a tough time, especially with sentience, because the Tau resistance is resistance to sentience. I to be honest, I used to run Eidolons with this because of the damage reduction. When like some of the damage source reductions was like additive, you could get to like pure immunity to like magnetic procs, right? And like radiation procs, and you just wouldn't take any damage at all. You would completely cheese it, but that doesn't exist in the game anymore. But that's what I was using this nezha for. But in terms of like getting health tank, these are some of the things that are added. It's not just health and armor and like percent reduction. There's a bunch of other things that are added on, and arguably you could go really far in the game with an adaptation mod and a ton of health recovery. Right? Like just some health, some armor, an adaptation mod, and the synth set on the Panzer. The amount of recovery that gives you, because think about it, the recovery mod Hunter recovery gives you back health based on the spore damage, right? And the 60 damage spores can exist on essentially a map wide amount of enemies, and each one is doing 60 damage, but then it's boosted by viral. So technically it's doing what? 60 plus 325%. Each enemy is taking 255 damage. Obviously it's reduced by armor, so this is going to get murdered. But then you have it based on all of the enemies. There's damage tick per second. And each enemy is regenning you. What is this, 30%? Times 0.3. Okay, so every enemy that has this, with before defenses, each enemy can regen you up to 67.5 health per second. Well, you can easily get this onto like 15 enemies. So with 15 enemies without armor, which is kind of a condition you can meet, I can be regenning my entire health bar every second. Because you can do a Terrify build now. And they would all just take 255 damage a second. That's my entire health bar. Passively. Just from the spores, and then I would have the health and energy from the synth set, which would also be regenning. So even though I have all of this damage reduction and all of this tank, the thing that's actually keeping me alive is still the spores. So it is what it is. Maybe I'll do like a Terrify build when I swap out Zadas. This is actually what I'm using to kill Archons right now. But like an AoE Terrify, just walk up, boop, nothing has armor. Get a little bit more strength on him, right? Make it a little easier to do the little pop. And I'd be regenning practically my entire health bar every second. And that's my current thinking on like maybe keeping myself alive. Because a 1.5 million shot is really high up. In between passively getting shield gate also. Because I'm going to be casting my 2 a lot. I'm going to be casting my 1. I'm going to be recasting Warding Halo, which is an instant shield gate in and of itself. So, in between all of that, having the windows pop in and out, like the iframes pop in and out, my thinking is I'd be able to keep nezha alive a lot higher now. Because I've gotten to 1500s, and I didn't have any issues the last time I tried this, and it was actually just straight up face tanking. No rolling guard, no real iframes besides the 3. Obviously, that's a substantial form of iframes, to be honest. But I wasn't using like an invisibility gimmick. It was just grab a melee weapon, see how far you could get, and I got a couple hours in and I just had to like go to work or something. So, food for thought. This is just some health tank. You have plenty of options. Now, the most important one, honestly, would be effective HP. Still, I know I hammered on it. Effective HP, lean into armor, which is not what's being said on YouTube right now. Because you have to consider the total damage reduction when considering health recovery. Because if you have no damage reduction and you heal for 100 health, you've recovered 100 health. But if you have 99% damage reduction, you've recovered 10,000 health, effective health. The enemy would have to do 10,000 damage to you to heal that 100 health. So the interaction for tankiness is heavily multiplied by health recovery. So armor, health, you would worry about EHP. So health, armor, adaptation, every single frame has these. Obviously, some frames have lower armor. But health recovery, this is why I push the Panzer so hard with the Equilibrium set. Because you're regenning so much health. It makes you pretty damn hard to kill. And here's the thing, is it's sort of like a noob crutch. Because the spores hit harder at lower levels. It actually makes you safer by the enemies taking more damage. It allows you to recover more health. So it actually helps you out when you're learning to health tank. Or learning shield tank. Your panic button is there a lot easier. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. But when you need the help on figuring out the mechanics is when that interaction is so useful. Is because it does more damage at lower levels. You will recover more health at lower levels. And it's just sort of like a nice buff at higher levels. Like it's a pleasant couple of health a second. I genuinely think if I do like dual armor shards, like a health shard and like 2 health regen shards, I think at higher levels, say like 5,000-6,000, I think the regen Archon shards are going to be giving me more regen. Even though it's like 15 health per second, right? But it's 15 health per second. That's what? 1% of my health constantly. It's enough to take care of some of the bleed over from the reduction that gets to my health. It's not a lot, obviously. So that's the main interaction. The rest of this stuff is a nice buff. Gloom and hard CC, like hard crowd control, are also fantastic ways of staying alive. If it gives you time to regen, like health, say like Nidus, for example. If you can crowd control a group of enemies and suck them all in with your larva, and they're not shooting you, that will give you time to regen health with your passive and if you're standing on your 4. Right? And then you also have the Helminth Charger set, which can give you an even bigger amount of health regen. That set gets pretty nutty, but the issue is keeping the damn thing alive, right? But the utility of it is insane. But if you can keep the Helminth Charger alive with enough armor, say you got like an armor invigoration with 1,000 armor, that's fantastic for that. You might want to consider running a Helminth Charger if you get 1,000 armor invigoration. Because it's so much armor. Or continue running the Panzer, right? That's probably the go-to. But if you felt like you just run it all the time, the Helminth Charger, if you have like a Nidus setup, and you get the 1,000 armor invigoration, you might as well take the little bastard, because he's... it's like 3%... Hold on. Was it? Which one is it? The Strain set. Dead maggots within 5 meters are consumed, restoring 4% missing health. These are the maggots that are on... That obviously with Nidus he has maggots. It's not that one. But the ones that actually come from the charger itself. So this ends up being like 10% health every, what, 5 seconds or something like that, I think is what this scales down into. Hold on, strain set. Strain sets. Where you at? There we go. You. Health restore cost. Okay. So basically every 24 seconds, you regen... I'm having a brain fart. Every 24 seconds that your Helminth Charger is alive, because this is a passive ability, the maggots that form on your Helminth Charger just passively grow, and he pops them off. And then they'll run around and, like, maggot stuff. But every 24 seconds, you're gaining passively 32% of your health, which is obviously scaled by your damage reduction. So this set is super good. You also get the corrosive stacks. The Helminth Charger increases damage. 30% persists, so another 240%. Scales with bite additively with maul, so for way higher 570%. And my favorite one is this crit damage mod. If you have a slash build and you really want to see like 1 million tick slash damage, you can get this like super easy. Organ Shatter, Gladiator Might, this guy. Jesus. Because this is persist, right? It's inconsistent damage. But you have 20 times 8. So it's 160 crit damage. It's a lot. Technically, this mod at max stacks is more than Organ Shatter and Gladiator Might. But it doesn't give you... You can't replace both of them because it doesn't give you the crit chance, right? But you have to run the Helmet Charger. So there are ways of further stacking health regen. And if you're really trying to do a long run and you're trying to squeak out as much as possible, health regen with a ton of flat damage reduction ends up being the thing that keeps you alive, like keeps you in the game, and your health is literally just preventing a one-shot. It's as long as you want to be able to basically regen your entire health bar every second. Sort of like shield gating, like every 1.3 seconds you need overshields. Eventually you want to be able to regen your entire health bar every second. And I'm pretty sure with this nezha I'm well above that. So it's sort of like health gating in a way. Where as long as you don't get one shot, you get your health back. And that's sort of how you need to think about it. As long as you don't get one shot, you regen your health super fast, and then you're ready to go as fast as possible. Because obviously, I know it's sort of a meme, but as long as your health doesn't get 0, it doesn't matter if you took 10 damage or 1,300 damage. It just only matters if you have 0 damage, or if you have 0 health. So, as long as you get your health bar back every second, because the tick, the heal, does operate on a tick system, especially for the spores. So, as long as you're regenerating your entire health bar every tick, you're essentially immortal unless you get one shot. So, there are ways of stacking this absurdly. And to be honest, Nidus is sort of the godfather of that. Chroma makes it look easy, though. So, food for thought. I've talked about this enough. It's just sort of a riff. Sorry for not putting a video out in a bit. But this is one of those things where it's always kind of annoyed me. Because clearly shield gating is better. Do not get me wrong. Shield gating is better. Nobody's arguing against it. But to say health tanking is garbage and don't even attempt it when there's the couple of frames that we have in the game that make this crap look easy, it is kind of overdone. Like there has never been any content in the game where I have not been able to do the content using this nezha. If anything, this is my default if I'm running into issues like when the Zeraman first came out. Very first time coming out. And there was like all those lag issues. And I was having trouble shield gating or because I was using the Brahma at the time, right? And I was running a speed nezha build. Very glass cannony, basically survives on iframes and the adaptation damage reduction with the 90% from the 3. And a grace, right? So a little bit of health regen, and you just survive on speed, basically, and not taking damage in the first place. I was having trouble keeping my shield up because I would literally be dead by the time I heard the animation. I was able to take this in to that and was completely fine. Now, obviously, I was a little slower because this is not a speed build, right? Like, 1.2, right? Um, but just being able to have like the confidence of being able to just face tank whatever the hell was there, even steel path stuff, no issues. I was able to face tank the enemies until they fixed the servers. Now I can do it with the regular nezha. But like that first week, oh good lord, like you would be doing missions where nobody was even in the mission with you, but your team was definitely there and texting you, so you knew the assholes were there. But you couldn't see them, and you couldn't see enemies on a couple missions. It was interesting. But this is my go-to safe choice because it's so face tanky. But more importantly, it doesn't require the setup that Nidus does, and it's energy efficient, or it's a closed energy system, where by the time my shield dies from Hunter Adrenaline, I'm full energy all the time. Even if I get completely energy drained, I don't have to care about cleansing it, because generally the bleed over from the shield is enough to refill my energy like every 10 seconds. And the more damage I take from enemies, the more energy regen I get back, right? Um, so I don't even have to care about being energy drained, because I'll just get the energy back. So I would highly recommend a face tanky build. I'm a fan of this. It makes you feel immortal. But this is my talk on like a little bit of a talk. I guess I could do like another more in-depth one, but considering this is an hour, I think this is a decent coverage for it. These are some additional forms of tanking to consider, or at least increasing your survivability if you cannot reliably shield gate due to like ping issues. These are some good options, especially if you start stacking like 2-3 of them together. Just adaptation and like a health mod, an equilibrium, and the synth set on the Panzer is a lot of effective HP on its own. That is a lot of HP on its own. Just that setup alone, because you get the 90% damage reduction. You're getting the health regen from the health orbs and the energy orbs. You're getting constant health regen, and it allows you to health regen tank significantly better. Obviously, if something one-shots you, well, you're kind of just dead. But at least this is an option. This is sort of taking that health regen tank, face tank setup and amping it a bit. But it can't get the job done yet. It's not level cap worthy. As soon as it gets level cap, I'll put a bow on it. But I'm not there yet. But 1500 is pretty far. But anyway, thank you for listening. Oh, I noticed it earlier. Hold on. For the Panzers, I still owe Panzers to R1Q, Kernan Kong, and Capitalism. Most of you guys I've friended in game, but I've just never seen you guys on. But the other 3 people have theirs, so half of the Panzers have been given out. You 3 guys, if you see this, leave a comment. If you've already given me, like if we've already friend requested, everybody that posted their IGNs on the last video, I friend requested. So super cool. Some guy is the YouTube name of the guy that won, not really won, but was the first one to reply Panzer. But then he didn't want the Panzer, so I told him, like, well, would you take a Predacite instead? And he got a Predacite. I think I gave him like a Vizier or something. But it's a Vizier with the stacked resistances also. And just in case people don't believe me, okay, Pharaoh Predacite. Our little Pharaoh Prime. There's the stacked resistance. Vizier, look at that. Stacked resistances. Crescent. There you go. His Predacite, CIA Otter. What an excellent name. Oh, and Medjay. Stacked resistances, it works. So, I hope you enjoy it. But that's that's the talk about like health tanking and some of the ways you can sort of finesse it a little bit more. So health, don't put more than a mod. Uh, like don't dedicate more than a mod to health. Armor, don't dedicate more than a mod, and I would highly recommend, unless you're doing like a gladiator setup, to leave it at one armor and then do one like an adaptation mod. If you have Guardian and Grace Arcanes, put those on there. But to be honest, just gonna say, if you got a rank 5 Grace and you didn't buy it and you actually earned it the hard way, you probably don't need this advice. I would be surprised if you needed this advice. Let me just say that. But if you didn't know this and this is the first time hearing about it and it helped you play the game or enjoy Warframe a little better, I'm glad to hear it. But accuracy, puncture, blast, it would help. I don't think it would be super effective in terms of like what could you prime something? Actually, that's a pretty interesting thing. Forced puncture procs are ultra rare. Oh, a forced puncture proc. I don't think you could abuse that at all. The Talons I know have a forced puncture proc. And something else with an alt fire. I remember because I looked it up a while ago. I know the Talons, the throwables, have forced puncture procs. And there's something else like a Harpack or something that has a forced puncture proc on the alt fire. But in terms of like stacking puncture, I'll have to think about that. I don't think there's any way you could prime, and I know there certainly hasn't been a build for priming for damage reduction. Like if you could do like a corrosive heat puncture proc build on a primer, and you could just like RNG impact and slash, right? Man, that's actually pretty interesting. I'd have to think about that. If you consider the damage reduction from puncture, what would be the best primer? Because most of the primers now are like elemental, right? I mean, you'd only have to get to 10, though. Actually, that's pretty interesting. Is there something where you can spread enough puncture procs that would effectively give you 90% damage reduction? Puncture blast? Because that would, what, make you 90% damage reduction with 75% accuracy? Would make you 10 times, 40 times tankier. Huh. That'd be something to consider. Especially if you're running adaptation. 40 times tankier with adaptation would make you 400 times tankier. If you could keep puncture and blast procs on everybody. Anyway, I'll think about that later. I've never primed something for that. Because you would only need it at level cap. Right? That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I've never seen a primer build like that. But anyway. Health, armor, adaptation, health recovery, and potentially gloom. With a bit of range on it, and obviously efficiency if your build can sustain it. On the synth set, Panzer with Hunter recovery and equilibrium on the frame. And that is a tremendous amount of effective HP. So, either way, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to my video. Have a blessed day, y'all. Oh, hold on. I know y'all are trying to get out of here. Hold on. A couple of questions, because man, I was not expecting to get such a good question. Some guy hit me with something. Hold on. Whoops. Go back. Come on. There we go. Okay, Q&A. I'll do like 10 minutes. Science and Physics channel. I wonder if the 10 Envoy is still meta. Because not the explosion itself, but because the missile, even though you're mostly using it for the explosion, the missile is, I think, multiplicative with a lower percentage with a galvanized mod, and obviously that isn't like the meta for it, right? Get a tenant with toxin because the weapon has an 8 cold on it. If you get toxin on the envoy, you don't even need to mod elemental to get viral on it, and then you just go for a slash build. That being said, I personally did do heat. Could you do a video listing your favorite options for daily drivers? Okay, daily drivers right now, to be honest, I'm using the stahlta. I made the video. I wasn't even joking. I did mess around with the Brahma. I wasn't even joking how much I was impressed with this. I even went out and got a Riven and rolled it a little bit. Crit damage, multi-shot projectile speed. It's an okay 3+. Yeah, the projectile speed for the alt fire, obviously CDMS is A-okay on a primary, right? But I like the projectile speed. I mean, I'm gonna have to keep rolling that Riven though. Okay, Nifty or William Martin. Nifty, but I hate to be that guy, but since this is mostly just stuff you would like to add to the game and your position is ahead of an alliance question, that's correct. Means that probably 0.01% or less of the player will be affected or care enough to use stuff like an alliance dojo. Bro, I'm telling you, if the alliance dojo could get something unique, like a foundry where you can queue anything, or set up a build tree that the game would follow without you having to redeem things one part at a time, everybody would just use it. That's all it would need. It could be a big empty room with a foundry in the corner, but it would allow you to queue up like 20 forma at once and you could just come back at the end of the month. It's the only place anybody would use. Obviously once a month, though. Maybe before... hold on. Like an Alliance Dojo. Now, it might not be the oldest player, but I've been here since roughly Trinity Prime. That's a decent amount of time. Maybe a bit before, and from what I've seen, is Warframe really isn't trying to be an MMO, at least in the direction, unless a massive portion of the community says something about adding more traditional MMO features. It will sadly never happen. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna lie. I agree with your sentiment. Obviously, I am in the minority of players in terms of like what I view as like a good Warframe experience, right? But it's just, this was like my personal list. I mean, you're right, but it's just sort of like, this was my personal list, right? And a couple of these things are heavily geared toward like what my group of people would need. Obviously, like none of this stuff was like, oh, this is how me, as an alliance leader, would, I know better than you, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's not how it works. Listen, they're incredibly smart people and knowledgeable people that have like 300 hours in the game. Obviously, they're rare, but they exist, right? I got a couple of them in the Alliance where it's like, they just remember, their minds are sponge and they remember stuff significantly better than me. But I've probably forgotten more than they know about the game, right? So it's just one of those things. But no, you've been here a solid amount of time, bro. Trinity Prime, that's been a bit, dude. But in terms of like social aspect, the only reason why I was going on the social aspect was the fact that Warframe just needs more that's not about running missions. If it really wants to stick around, like there's a reason games like EVE Online still exist. To be honest, it's kind of dying now. Not badly, but like it is. But it's been the social aspect, the community aspect. People stick around for that if they actually make friends. Call super buggy and annoying. Yeah. Video on settings. Okay, real quick, and then I'm gonna do the question that guy asked, because Jesus, I got hit with one. And I looked it up. I actually spent a day looking this up. And this does not exist. Okay, borderless full screen, Windows mode, native, aspect ratio, auto, VSync off, capped at 120. Brightness is standard, contrast standard, field of view is 90. I like seeing the FPS down in the bottom left. I use enhanced graphics engine. It just doesn't feel like DirectX 12 or whatever the hell it is that bad anymore. There are slight hiccups, but they feel like once it gets a couple out of the way, it seems like it goes away. Quality preset, I have custom sets. If you're having issues with FPS, the first thing you should attack, honestly, is the shadows. If you're having issues with FPS, the first thing you need to adjust is the shadows. GPU particle quality. This just needs to say amount of particles. Okay, just... And obviously, like, subparticles and, like, reflections and shit like that. Because this is quality. Right? 2 quality particle settings. Okay, whatever. Listen, I have... I have a i9 12900K and an RTX 2080 Ti. My system is full DDR5, 32 gigs of RAM. Some type of Ethernet. It's broadband, so it's whatever. It's not fiber though. Couple of NVMe drives, the 7 gig ones. Not size wise, I mean like speed. Yeah, 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes. So 1 terabyte and 2 terabytes. And they're all the 7 gig up down. So it's all for speed. And I don't really store that much on my computer. It's mostly games, and if it's something that I need, I'll download it, use it once, and as soon as I'm done with it, I'll delete it. So I'm not really leaving stuff. I don't need a storage drive. But even with those, geometry quality low, shadow quality low, texture, I leave it as high. Because my GPU has enough VRAM. This one is literally just, do you have the VRAM or not? The only time I would say lower this is if you're using integrated graphics. Because your quote-unquote GPU, the onboard graphics, unless they've changed it, my understanding is the integrated GPU shares RAM with the system. So obviously, the less textures, the less RAM you'll need for it. So I leave it as high because my GPU just has the bandwidth on it, or the space. Even with my GPU, particle system quality low, GPU particle quality disabled. AA, I leave it medium. I can notice it when it goes to low, but I don't notice a benefit at high. Even at 100, it starts looking a little weird. And at 50%, it isn't too bad on system tasks. So if you like it, do you? Temporal VFX. You move through the levels so fast, I hardly notice it. Anisotropic filtering, 4x is fine. You're moving fast through the level. Trilinear filtering. Walking around on your orbiter, your frame will look great. The other advanced settings, everything's off except for bloom, which is at 30%, which keeps it from being annoying. High shader quality. I would keep off. It is a massive hog of resources. These three right here, dynamic lighting, volumetric lighting, local reflections. To be honest, I didn't find local reflections too bad. And volumetric lighting will make things look gorgeous when you're running around a mission, and then it will kill your graphics card when you go into an open area. And dynamic lighting, the game will look gorgeous, but it's just, you're going to have to be shooting enemies through it, so I like turning it off so I can see everything. So I hope that answers that. Yeah, the stahlta, kind of disappointing you didn't showcase electric on the alt fire. Yeah, I showed raw damage builds because I was using Deadhead. You're right, though. Like, anything where it's like a single element or something like that, it's just for corrosive. If you're doing the alt fire build, you can't really go wrong with it. Like, there's not going to be a place where it doesn't at least do okay, right? But the electric is pretty nice. But you're relying on fall off damage to not screw you, right? Because obviously you can potentially trigger a bunch of Tesla effects. So your damage will be amped, obviously, because of like a potential headshot. It's just these sorts of things, like the elemental hits like this seem a little bit harder, and because the stahlta doesn't have an insane status chance, it just didn't feel reliable. Like, let's see what the alt fire is. Yeah, 57%. I mean, if you trigger electric, it could be pretty good. But remember, you don't get critical hits on the AoE now. Or headshots. You don't get headshots on the AoE. So it's like a double nerf to headshots. So, and bladed rounds, agreed. Bladed rounds is another flex slot. I'm just not a fan of the hyper conditionals. It's personality. It's personal choice. Obviously, it would do pretty good. Corrosive max on procs and doesn't increase the damage of slash procs at all. You could just replace it with a single element. It's about raw damage though. It's about a hybrid. Cause say like, oh god, I'm gonna find paint. Right? Like, say you have damage, right? You have like damage per second. So you have 1 second. If you do raw damage, right? Unless it's gas or electricity, which is one of the nice things about electricity. Raw damage, if you can kill an enemy in 1 second with raw damage, you don't give a shit about a dot. You just don't care. And corrosive, when getting stacks, you got to remember corrosive triple dips. Right? So you have enemy armor, which starts out, let's say, at 100. And you start out, and time goes this way. Highest end graphics only. Each time you hit, and multi-shots included, every time you trigger a corrosive status chance, right? It goes down to 20 from corrosive procs. But then the thing is that it reduces the armor by 80%. Obviously, this doesn't scale to infinity, but for 90% of the cases that you're dealing with, 10 stacks of corrosive is just fine. And if you kill an enemy before you get 10 stacks, you're still doing okay. The only time you lose something, the only time you lose damage or effectiveness of continuing to shoot the enemy is if it's down here at 20. But remember, and I'm going to go to orange, if you're modded for corrosive already, your portion of corrosive damage, if you're shooting against an enemy with ferrite, which is most of what's in the game, you start at 25, and then you go down to, what is it, 75? So 4, right? So with 10 stacks, if your weapon is dealing corrosive, it's analogous to the yellow chart, right? But your corrosive damage on your weapon, the modded corrosive, is never dealing with 100. So even though it maxes in procs, your raw damage goes up so much, which does help. Not necessarily with like slash procs, you're right, but you're trying to deal damage over time. Don't save. So like going back to the dots, let's extend T out a little bit more. So let's say this is 1. Let's say 3, 5, 10. Okay. Raw damage. We'll do red for raw damage. Raw damage is universally king before a second. If you can get enough raw damage on your weapon to do the mission type, okay, if you can get enough raw damage on your weapon to do the mission type, and every enemy that you shoot in there will die in less than a second, there is no point in worrying about electric. Obviously, it's nice. You're gonna see it trigger a couple of times. But you're trading raw damage for 1/6 of an electric proc. Because electricity is lower, right? Or it goes to 5. Crap. Where the other ones start at 1 second, electricity, a little thunderbolt, goes to 5 seconds, but you get a proc immediately. So electricity damage, right? The Tesla coil effect. Electricity, tick damage, and proc duration. So at least with electricity, you'll get an electric Tesla coil effect if it triggers, but you'll get it immediately. And then it's done at 5. But the scaling on this is 0.5 of modded base damage. So in order to mod for electricity, you would have to lose raw damage. And you would, if you were to do that, you would never get, besides the innate radiation, the 75% armor pen. Because the weapon deals innate radiation, and it deals a shit ton of it on the alt fire. Having corrosive and radiation on your alt fire will allow you to destroy Grineer 90% of the time. Until you start getting into like tankier enemies, right? So for killing Grineer, having both elements that the enemy is 75% weak to, where if you did a single element, or a single uncombined element, like a base element, you wouldn't be able to get the plus 75 bonus. So you would lose out on a ton of raw damage. So yes, technically electricity, if you can reliably proc the Tesla coil effect, and you can group the enemies, the damage can skyrocket. Absolutely, your output. But if you're trying to kill something and you want to kill it in less than a second, which you should be wanting to do with every enemy, just go corrosive, and even though it's not like corrosive doesn't boost it, but you can always primer viral. If you're not running a Panzer, you can just primer viral for like the one enemy that you come across that for whatever reason is Grineer, and you just don't want to use the alt fire on it. So, and the slash procs aren't too bad. Obviously, it's not hitting for millions with 100 munitions proc 90% of the time. but you can hit something for like 200k slash proc. So the slash damage is good enough for most of the star chart. Hammer shot, it depends, dude. Obviously the bonus crit damage is great. The status chance is good also. Um, but it's about opportunity cost. Like, here's the build. Like, because I got this, I replaced Serration. And still not a lot of people have hammer shot. It's not a hard mod to get, but it is an out of the way mod. Let's see what the drop rate is on that. Isn't that like one of the ones with a really bad drop rate? Yeah. 1% chance for nightmare. From a nightmare. Rotation A. Enemies. Yeah. This is part of the reason why I don't recommend this mod. Is because it's a 1% drop chance from a mode that most people skip. Just being honest. A lot of people get what? Drifting contact and then just bounce. So that's part of the reason why I don't recommend that mod. Obviously the mod exists, but it's just with a 1% drop chance. I wouldn't assume that's one of the mods that people just get or assume that they have it. Okay, here we go. Gentle Grim. What a hell of a set of questions. And I actually ended up looking this up because I could think of a couple. Like, he asked about wordy question inbound, but I'm having trouble finding the information online. I main Wisp, good choice, with your group and saw Asian Invasion do an infinite stack 3 with Roar. I actually had to look up this video. It's a pretty cool interaction he was using. I knew about the mechanic, but I didn't know about it on Wisp. Just to let you know, I learned something when I watched it. But I knew about the weapons damage potentially increasing in ability. I didn't know it worked on Breach Surge though. That was news to me. I main Wisp with my group and saw Asian Invasion do an infinite stack 3 with Roar, but I know the calculation are done as weapon damage. So I'm confused why you wouldn't run Eclipse or Zada's Whisper. Okay. The simple answer to that is because of how he was getting the scaling, right? The initial damage was off of the arcanes and being piggybacked onto the ability by the Theorem Arcane. That's what was dragging that damage. The thing that makes it super easy that he was using. No. This one. I even tried the thing out, seeing exactly what it was. This is the one that he was using, and it's the interaction with the kit guns. Read what the thing says. This is how he was getting the elements onto the Breach Surge. Okay. On Kit Gun Kill, 20% chance to spawn volatile hives for 12 seconds that explode when enemies approach for 80 heat damage and 10 meters. Standing in the area applies heat damage type to Theorem Arcanes. Okay. So he was killing something, getting the thing on the ground, the little AoE to stand in. And then this was applying to the ability. Or this was providing scaling to the ability. Okay. And the reason why he was going Roar, or specifically the reason why he wasn't going Zada's Whisper or Eclipse is because those don't apply to abilities. Roar is one of the few buffs in the game that you can apply to weapons and abilities at the same time. So it was an easy choice. So the next question, and here's the one that killed me, because I looked this up and I actually probably spent like 6 hours looking for this. There is no comprehensive list for this. What abilities calculate as weapon damage? There is no list, no comprehensive list that shows this. And the more I thought about it, because I haven't uploaded in like a week, right? I think I might go do this, like with the Archon mods. Just go through and test everything. I mean, what? It's like 50 warframes, right? You do like 3 a day, and you're done in 2 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks if you half-ass it. You get it done in like 2. So I might actually make this list, but don't hold me to it yet. But I've already been thinking of like ways to easily test. But the biggest thing is that in terms of scaling. Oh, hold on. Let me go through the other questions. What abilities calculate as weapon damage? Obviously, there's Wisps, Breach Surge. What else do you have? The shards on Mag can get influenced by damage. And I was thinking of like ways to like easily test for it. You can sort of feel these out to see what the givens are, and I think, yeah, okay, Ross Kyle mentioned it. Frost at numbers 1. I think this applies also to Volt, where you can increase it a little bit. But Vigorous Swap, and he was right. Okay, so he mentioned Eclipse only affects actual weapon damage, so it wouldn't affect the damage that generates the sparked. So indirectly, yes, but the multiplier is strength. Okay. He is right. Because the sparks and the way the multiplicative damage on that, and this is part of what he was using. I don't need a calculator. I need paint. Okay, so you have like say time, right? And you hit something where the multiplicative comes in, and part of the reason why Roar is just so bloody wonderful to use. In combination with Breach Surge. We'll do purple for Breach Surge. Okay. So let's say you have your multiplier. It's here, right? You get your first Breach Surge proc. Time is going this way. So you get your first Breach Surge proc. You have 0 damage. Boom. It's X, whatever your multiplier is. And you deal 100 damage. But your multiplier is, say, 5 even. It's a pretty basic multiplier if you ask me. But say you do 100 damage for your first proc. This damage is now the scaling of the next spark. So say you have a 5x multiplier, then it will go up to, on the next tick, it'll go up to 500. Because now the numbers might not be exact, because obviously you have like armor and stuff like that. But because the next tick, the next spark that hits something is dependent on the spark before, if you have a high multiplier and a long time for the sparks to jump, say like 20 seconds, the sparks get to jump a bunch of times. So each time they jump, they'll get the multiplier. If it creates a spark, right? And like you can increase the number of sparks with like dots. Like slash toxin is wonderful for it, right? You wouldn't want to use heat, ideally, if you were trying to do like a melee weapon on like a breach surge build. You could actually go like slash toxin or something, or slash electric if you want to. But he used gas because it lingers, and it was obviously a unique interaction. That was pretty cool to see. But like, if you don't have the kit guns, you could go like slash toxin. And I've done that with a breach surge build. Like when the helmet first came out, I ran Breach Surge Nezha for a long time using a Toxin Slash build on my Guandao. So, because when you end up with stuff like this, and the reason why he did Roar is each time the ability deals damage, Roar boosts. Though Vigorous Swap, I honestly can't remember if Vigorous Swap is multiplicative in that situation, but it obviously applies once, right? Would Wisp Soulgate calculate as weapon damage? No. What helmet is the best for these types of interactions? Ooh, obviously Breach Surge would be the go-to. Breach Surge is such a powerful ability, and it's weird that it's on a helmet. I think Frost. What is it? Frost 1 is a helmet ability. Let me go check. Let me just look at the helmets and I'll be able to tell you. Let's see. Quill Horizon Decoy. Dispensary, Elemental Ward, Power. I think Elemental Ward you can tweak with it, but the damage is super weak. Marked for Death. I think Vigorous Swap boosts it. But I'm pretty sure the multiplier is actually, because this is reflective, right? Of the damage you put into the enemy. I think the multiplier is on the weapon itself, but it doesn't double dip. It'll definitely apply to Nourish, but it's because the toxin is treated as a mod. Null Star, I'm pretty sure that applies to the heat, though I don't think you would get like corrosive on it, and if you did, it definitely wouldn't combine. Oh, Smite for Vigorous Swap, and no, not Vigorous Swap. Arcane Arachne. I know it gets boosted by that. I'm not sure about Vigorous Swap, but I've done the Arachne thing. Shock. I think this is the same as Nourish, because if you take the augment for Shock, it applies as a mod. And Smite also counts as a radiation like mod. What was the other one? Tesla Nervosa has some pretty nasty multipliers on it. It's just really annoying to keep up. Because there's a mod for those guys that's actually like a really nasty multiplicative scaling. Let me see what it is. Oh, Tesla Bank. Absorbs damage. And it'll be channeled into an 8-meter burst of electricity. Roar double dips on this. And he also has the oh, what is it? Overdriver? I think it's Overdriver. Yeah, Overdriver on his 2. Where it'll boost a couple times. But obviously this is a little more annoying to deal with, but if you're dealing with like Vomon where he has, you know, a steel, his 4, and you vacuum everything in, the electricity AoE is proccing on top of itself, so it's really nasty damage. Okay, so the main thing would be is it in terms of like would Eclipse increase the damage debuff on Breach Surge? I hope it doesn't debuff Breach Surge, as well as the same rate as the damage or the debuff calculated as ability strength. It's more. It's going to increase your damage, but the difference is where is it increasing your damage? Eclipse, pound for pound in terms of raw damage your weapon does, is a significantly better damage buff to raw damage if you're running something like Corrosive. If you are running a slash build where you're all dot based, you would take Roar. But the issue is that the Roar percentage as a Helminth is significantly lower. It's like 50%. So it would be better if you're running like a slash build, you probably have space on your melee setup to run a faction mod, and then you kind of wouldn't need Roar. I mean, obviously, if you have space on your build or you have like a garbage ability on the frame that you want to use, by all means put Roar on it. It's free damage. It's free real estate. But yeah, okay. But yeah, what abilities calculate as weapon damage? Man, I might actually have to make this list, because I looked it up. Like, and there's some old stuff. Oh, yeah, Gara. Her little slash thing has some pretty nasty. Look at this. Yeah, what is it? Oh man, no quarter had a build on this. What was it? Gara? What was he using? The Cybear. The heavy attack passive applies to Gara. Gara's 1. So you can actually force like slash procs onto it. So that one counts. The giveaway generally for melee scaled ability or modded scaling ability or weapon damage scaling abilities is the easy giveaways. Is like pseudo exalteds. Generally, anything that you hear somebody calling a pseudo exalted is the clearest yes to it. It's just there's some mods that apply where technically they wouldn't. But like the easiest way to check is to do damage with an ability and then proc vigorous swap and then do the damage again, and if it's higher, that's better. And then check the theorems and stand in one of the buffs and see if it applies. If it applies, that gets affected. But then you have stuff like Arcane Arachne where it just... I don't know how that thing applies to so many things. I mean, like, it makes sense that it applies, but I just don't understand how it applies to so much. So... would Eclipse increase the damage debuff on Breach Surge as well as the same rate the damage, or is the debuff calculated as ability strength? The Eclipse would not affect abilities, but it would increase the raw damage. Eclipse only affects actual weapon damage, so would affect the damage that generates the spark, so indirectly, but yes, the multiplier is strength. Yeah. No, he said it right. The first spark is the big bump, and then everything after that. So the spark would get boosted by Roar, and then the spark would get the strength multiplier, and then the damage dealt by the spark to the enemy would get boosted by roar, which would then boost the next spark damage, right? Hold on. Hey, it's Warframe Grind again. That guy's killing it. He's coming up with cool builds. Oh, Daily Driver. Okay, did I mention that? Okay, Stahlta. I'm 100% using the Stahlta. Big fan of the Zacti. As a primer, do like a corrosive heat build. Wherever that is. I think it was this one. I swapped it out for magnetic. But yeah, corrosive heat causes the gas to do damage. Magnetic gas is free real estate in terms of procs. Right now I'm feeling the Guandao. I'm liking the Guandao right now. I got a kind of a nice Riven. Crit damage, attack speed, Toxin. I mean, Toxin isn't the worst. And minus finisher damage. It's the closest thing to a nice Riven for this. I care to roll for. Only got 48 rolls into it, though. I was messing around with the Caustasis. Yeah, almost a 9-meter range. And for, like, trash clearing, I was running, like, a spring-loaded blade and just running around with, like, 11 meters. It felt like 2018, gentlemen. It was wonderful. Running around with an 11-meter melee. But more importantly, I was testing a build for this because the heavy attack has a monster heavy attack scaling on it, but only on the sludge trail. But it's like 800% additional condition overload scaling. So I was seeing if I could like bop stuff with the sludge trail. I got up to 50k. I did okay, but it's not like memeable right now. I'm sure if I put a bunch of effort into it, I could probably meme something into existence. Okay, and I appreciate this the about the AI question from last week. Yeah, it's just when those things pop up, don't please don't anticipate them being like a regular thing. Um like the random questions because it's just we're a social clan. It's just whenever they come up and was just we had like a really interesting one. And the final question for those that we sort of got stuck on, for those that actually care and have made it into this god awful 2-hour video. No, I'm not editing this. Is he had an incredibly valid point that all it would take for AI to be smarter than us is to like they would just have to be able to learn faster, but that's assuming my point of view is that's assuming that it's been programmed. Like the fact is that if it can encompass the world's knowledge, then the AI would clearly be the smartest thing. But the issue is that humans can assign value to something that's unique. All you have to do is rephrase the question, and the AI wouldn't be able to keep up. Like the example that we got stuck on, and it kind of sucks that we stopped there because it wasn't really an answer. It was my point though, but like he had to go, and it was just like the thing that was like the hanging Chad, where it was like clearly it's a point, but like, did you really mean it? Like, obviously I'm from Florida, and that kind of triggers the shit out of me. But so the question is like, you could decide, you could describe with words a hug, right? An AI could then just use the same words and repeat them back to you. Obviously, there's that like Turing test, right? So staying in line with that, nothing special. But you could then, as a human, describe how it feels to hug somebody and then to be hugged. The AI could scrape all of the information on the internet, compile it, and then give you something back where it matches. Not a big deal. We're both still on board. But if you get like to a really specific example, and this is going to be for the boys, um, how would you describe the difference between hugging your girlfriend and the hug that you had with your girlfriend after you realized she was the woman you were going to ask to marry? Like, obviously that's hyper specific, but the fact is any guy that has gotten married probably didn't even think about that, but at the same time, maybe you forgot it, maybe you forgot when it was. You probably maybe remember something else where you were like, "Oh, this is the woman I'm gonna ask to marry. That's my future wife," sort of thing. But at the same time, even if you never thought about it, just on a human relationship, you cannot tell me that it was the exact same hug to you, right? And a computer can't do that. A computer can't do that. So all it's going to do is it's going to just change what the goalposts are. Everybody's going to learn what an AI can do. It's going to increase the floor of what counts as like a workable intelligence, but it's just going to move the goalposts, right? Like that's the ultimate answer. Is it just becomes an arm race? People come up with experiences or better phrasing and better words to describe more things. Like there's the one thing I pulled up, and it was part of the example, is words for snow, right? Thesaurus.com coming in hot. Let's see if it's useful. Synonyms for snow: snowed, snowing, snow-like. Then you have snowfall. Um, then you also have, let me find the list that I used. Hold on. Okay. So the number that I heard was that the Inuit have like 30 something words for snow. And one of the easiest ways to figure out as a society what we value the most or spend the most mental time on is to see how many descriptive words the society as a whole has to describe that. Okay? The Inuit regularly interact with snow, so it would make sense, based on their experience, to have more descriptive words. And just going down here, you can see the English words for descriptive words for snow, and there's just 40. Right? All it would take to beat an AI is to just come up with new words faster than it can adapt, or don't program them in. Like, it's not going to be able to come up with a new word because we're going to have to then adapt to it. So the issue of like which would be smarter, AI or like humans, seems like it would be a new moot point. Because adaptability would permanently be in creativity for the people, but the issue is that can an AI just brute force it? And the answer is probably yes. If it can't now, or in like the next 20, 30 years, eventually Terminator's gonna happen, right? Or something Terminator like, and it will just be able to brute force what we're doing better than us, but it will never actually be creative. So, unless you value creativity at 0, then obviously an AI is better, right? But yeah, something else. Chosen Bard, Tricky Dick Tracy. We're all down with it. And Arcus Gizio level cap viable. I'll work on that. That's not too hard. But I gotta end the video. We are at 2 hours. This has turned into a legendary ramble. But anyway, I'm gonna call it here. Panzer Bros, get in contact with me if you see me online. I friend requested all of you that posted your names. If you see me online, just message me. I gotcha. But anyway, everybody, thank you for hanging out. Thank you for watching the vid if you made it this far. This was a little long. I also let it run a little long because I try to keep it to 50. I try. But I didn't upload last week. So hopefully this makes up a little bit for it. But okay, so task to do is seriously evaluate if I want to make an ability, like test abilities for weapon scaling. Man, that actually sounds pretty cool. Because in terms of like contributions to like Warframe, I don't think I've done anything on like the pillar side in a while. It's been a while. Like I've done some stuff for like events. Like it's been like minor stuff. Like what was it, the Hildren trick? Or the Hildren trick for getting energy back? On Orphix Venom. I think was like my last contribution. But either way, I'll think about it. That's 50 frames testing them, 200 abilities, 50 passives. That might be something I'll chip away on and then make a list. But anyway, thank you guys for hanging out. Y'all have a wonderful day. If you made it this far, we did it, boys. Have a blessed day, guys.